weird game. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where in spite of it being kind of a weird game, and in spite of it having a whole lot of special teams, the Kraken still come out on top in this one, rather decisively 4-1 over the New York Islanders, getting them hopefully back on track and starting a trend of winning that the Kraken desperately need to be picking up some points here through these last few games before the Olympic break, especially with that daunting March schedule that we've talked about really since the beginning of the season. But yeah, as far as this game is concerned, if I had told you going into it with the Kraken 1-4-1 in their last 6 games, that there would be as much special teams as there was going to be with the Kraken still last in the league in penalty kill. They're now right there with Ottawa. They've kind of gone back and forth. Both teams picking up a couple good nights on the penalty kill to jump each other in the standings. But coming into the night, the Kraken were once again worst on the kill in the NHL. Yeah, if you said the Kraken were going to have 7 penalty kills with the league's worst penalty kill, and even 4 power plays, having given up 3 shorthanded goals in the last 3 games, you might not assume that this game was going to go especially well for them. But they played pretty well on special teams and got a couple 5-on-5 goals to make it happen. But before we jump into the game itself, there are some notable changes in the Kraken lineup, not actually players in and out so much. I mean, Grubauer and Decord switch places again, as we've seen over the last little bit, so Grubauer starting in this one. But the lines for the Kraken on the forward end are fairly jumbled. It's McCann coming up to the first line in the place of Capo Caco, so that's Eberle, Beniers, and McCann. Probably the best 3 scorers that is probably your best forward line that you could have put out there, so it makes sense that would be the first line. And the second line, or at least the Chandler Stevenson line anyway, it's hard to tell exactly what the second, third, or fourth line was. I mean, you can kind of assume that the fourth line is the Ben Meyers line, but as far as ice time is concerned, usage of the lines, it was really hard to tell throughout the course of this game. Aside from the first line is pretty obvious, but the other 3 lines, they were mixed in there kind of whenever they could. I think a lot of that really being thrown off by the amount of special teams that there were in this game. But at least the Stevenson line still has Tolvanen on a one wing, but then Berkeley Catton on the other wing. Is that line of Wright, Catton, and McCann really just gets split up and spread out throughout the Kraken lineup. Wright ends up then on a line with Capo Caco and Jaden Schwartz, so Wright with a couple of pretty decent wingers there, and Schwartz and Caco. And then the fourth line stays pretty similar. I mean, you get Freddie Gaudreau back into that line with Ben Meyers and Ryan Winterton, but I guess not too different there. Really just it's that line that it's still a line that I really liked the idea of. It just never really seemed to mesh. And who knows, maybe we'll see that line return at some point in the season. Again, I really liked the idea of Catton, Wright, and McCann. It just, for whatever reason, it didn't really seem to fully mesh together, even though individually I thought they were playing decently, just didn't really seem like a cohesive unit. Anyway, that line gets blown up and scattered across the other lines for the Kraken. And for the most part, I'd say that it worked. The first line definitely looked dangerous. The second line, the Stevenson line, seemed like kind of a disjointed group of guys, but Catton had a couple of pretty good plays. He had a pretty limited ice time, not featuring on either the power play or penalty kills. So again, especially with the amount of special teams we saw in this game and him not currently on any of those units, his ice time did suffer quite a bit in this game, but I think it's somewhat understandable, and eventually I'd like to see him back on the power play, but at least for now the power play is working, so I don't know that you want to mess with it too much, and it's definitely just more important for him to get that development at 5-on-5. The power play can figure itself out eventually. Regardless, the first line I thought looked really good. The right line, yeah, it had its ups and downs throughout the game. The fourth line keeps doing fourth line things, and the Stevenson line had some good moments as well. But really, I think it was for the Kraken, it seemed important to get that McCann-Eberle line back together, as they were the drivers and really seemed to control play whenever they were out on the ice. But regardless of really how we feel like the lines performed in this game, I'm sure we'll get another chance to see these same lines in the next game against Anaheim here in a couple days, since the Kraken won. I would not expect too many changes as far as the lineup is concerned going into that game against the Ducks, which hopefully we can see a similar result from, because the Kraken desperately need to be beating the Ducks and doing it in regulation, since that is one of the teams the Kraken now find themselves chasing in the standings, but still right around the same number of points. As we do get into the game itself, though, the tone of this game would get set pretty early on. That being the first power play of the game, which comes the way of the New York Islanders. and it comes on a pretty soft hooking call against Freddie Gaudreau. I mean, he kind of gets his stick around him, but immediately lets go of the stick. Completely actually ends up dropping his stick to try and prevent the hooking call, but they still make what is, yeah, I would say a very soft hooking call. Gaudreau goes to the box, and this is a game that as it went along, it would just be called incredibly tightly by the officials. There were a lot of, I would say, certainly calls that you would not see in the postseason. And to be clear, that was going both ways, though again, the Islanders end up with 3 more power plays than the Kraken do, so while it was soft calls both ways, the Islanders definitely seem to benefit from it a little bit more, or at least get more opportunities from those soft calls. As far as the playoff thing is concerned, if we saw this same exact play happen in the playoffs, based on how much more leeway players are given in the postseason, maybe 3 or 4 of the calls that happen in this game would happen in a postseason game. Maybe there's an extra man one that you can't really avoid that one. A high sticking call that honestly I didn't see it happen, but we'll just assume that it's a stick to the face and that's pretty cut and dry as well. I think there was probably one other hooking or tripping call, maybe 1 or 2 other hooking or tripping calls that might legitimately get called in a postseason, but for the most part, as we'll see, there's a lot of calls here. I maybe won't go over every single call, but especially the first few, it was, yeah, these are pretty soft, quick whistles from the officials, almost making you wonder, especially if you're more into conspiracy theories, which I mean, personally, I don't really buy into too many sports, or really, I guess, otherwise conspiracy theories, other than I suppose to joke about them a little bit, but wouldn't fully buy into it. But if you do at least enjoy the conspiratorially minded approach to some things, then there might be something to the idea that the league, knowing that this was going to be a nationally televised game, and certainly wanting the numbers of these nationally televised games to get a little bit better, they see Kraken Islanders on the schedule. I mean, for one, why are you putting Kraken Islanders on a national TV broadcast? But especially considering these are 2 teams that really like to play from the back end forward and just take advantage of mistakes and not generate too many chances of their own. We did see the other meeting between these 2 teams on the island earlier this season resulted in a 1-0 shootout victory, which does mean that there was no actual scoring all the way through overtime. So maybe the league then just gave a quick call down to the officials and said, hey, maybe push these guys along a little bit, give them a little bit more man advantage time to see if we can't get at least some scoring into this game that is going to be on that national stage. Again, I don't actually think that that would have happened, but it isn't totally beyond the realm of possibility, I suppose, and it would kind of explain to some degree just how softly some of these are called, especially right out of the gate as the game gets started. Anyway, this first one, unfortunately for the Kraken, does not go particularly well. It's back to more of the same from what we saw from the road trip, as the Kraken find a way to give up yet another early goal to an opponent. It's a very quick power play goal for the Islanders. I actually can't remember if they won the opening faceoff and kept it in the offensive end, or there was one clear and they got it back in quickly. Regardless, they end up with a puck set up in the Kraken end of the ice, get it down kind of behind the net, down into the corner, and eventually it's just a pass up into the slot and a one-time shot that ends up beating Grubauer off the far post and into the net. So a pretty well-placed shot off of, just a pass from below the goal line. So for Grubauer, he has to be kind of up against his post and can't really take away that shooting angle as much as he would usually like to try and attack it a little bit. But yeah, the pass from below the goal line up into the slot and then the shot to the far side post is just well pulled off by the Islanders, and it does get them that early 1-0 lead. And then less than 2 minutes later, things go from bad to worse for the Kraken, especially if you aren't overly jazzed about how this Kraken penalty kill has been playing. Now, they have been a lot better since starting the winning streak before the holiday break, but yeah, they're still the league's worst penalty kill, and they did just give up the first goal of the game within the first couple minutes of the game, and now the Kraken are going right back to the penalty kill on, again, a pretty soft tripping call down in the corner in the Kraken end. Fortunately, the Kraken killed this one off very well through the 2 minutes, hardly let the Islanders into the offensive end. I'm not even sure if they got a shot on goal. They might have gotten one shot on goal towards the end of it, but really nothing doing for the Islanders on this one. The Kraken, though, maybe just wanted to pad those penalty kill stats a little bit more, make up for the giving up that one goal, as with just a couple seconds left in this kill, it's clearly going to be successful, but down deep in the Kraken end, it's Montour who gets caught for a high stick. Again, this is one I didn't see. I heard that it was not a particularly good call, but I didn't see it and haven't seen a replay. So usually those are fairly cut and dry. I'll just assume that this one is, yeah, a good call, I guess, by the officials. Regardless, it sends the Islanders to their third power play. They'll be starting that third power play just past the 6-minute mark of this first period. So we're still not very much into the game. The Islanders have a goal, and they're going to get a third chance with a man advantage. A little bit of overlap time with the two-man advantage really shouldn't make that much of a difference. It doesn't. The Kraken not only kill off the couple overlapping seconds, but also do a very effective job of killing off this third Islanders power play. They do get a couple chances actually on net. Actually, they had a couple pretty decent passing plays in this power play that set up what could have been grade A looks, but then they did something on the power play that certainly from past years we're fairly familiar with watching the Kraken, where they would do a lot of passing around the outside and then eventually get a good pass across, which looks like it's going to set up a very good shot. But instead of getting the shot off, they just catch that pass and then look for another one, completely squandering the good chance that that pass that led to that opportunity could have allowed. Yeah, so the Islanders did, I think, kind of give up on a couple of pretty good opportunities. They also got a couple of shots that came off of some good crossing passes. They were met with some very good blocks from the Kraken. I think Riker Evans had a good block. Lindgren, I'm pretty sure, had a good block as well. Really, the team in general, even at 5-on-5 in this game, was doing a very good job of helping Grubauer whenever there was potentially a good passing play that could lead to a chance that Grubauer might not have that great of a chance to make the save on. They would have a defenseman in the shooting lanes that was able to get in the way of the shot. So a lot of good shot blocks, generally speaking, in this game from the Kraken, but definitely on the kill to help them get through the next 4 minutes of power play after giving up that first goal. And also, fortunately for the Kraken, just after they get finished killing off the third of those Islanders power plays, the second one that they successfully kill off, the Islanders seem to forget that they're no longer on the man advantage, which, again, to be perfectly fair to them, at this point, they've spent the majority of the game with one extra skater than the Kraken, but now that the Kraken have 5 skaters on the ice, the Islanders can't put a 6th guy out on the ice without pulling the goaltender, so they just count the number of Kraken players, send one extra guy out there, but that does lead to a too many men call, which, yeah, there's no way really around this one. Actually, the officials kind of gave the Islanders a bit of a break. They gave them a good amount of time to try and get the problem corrected before eventually they had to call it. You could hear clear as day throughout the arena, multiple Kraken players, the bench yelling too many men. Eventually the refs do call it. The Kraken will get their first power play of the game, and within, I think, not very long in the power play, maybe 15 seconds into the power play, McCann gets tripped, which, again, pretty soft tripping call. I would say it's very similar to the call that led to the third power play for the Islanders. It is a stick, honestly, more in the mid section of the player that ends up going down. The player does end up going down, so you can see where it would look like a trip to an official if they didn't really see the play that well, but both of them, I don't know, maybe it's a makeup call. It seemed like a pretty soft call of McCann. Regardless, there were some soft calls the other way, so it's more than fair, and for the Kraken, they'll happily take it as it sends them to 1 minute and 13 seconds of 5-on-3, which is something the Kraken, I think at this point, lead the NHL in 5-on-3 time. Part of that is because they have not scored very much at 5-on-3, has been a bit of an issue, and now down 1 goal, they could desperately use a 5-on-3 goal. There's also the fact that while it was the penalty, the arm went up within just a few seconds of the Kraken power play starting, they didn't get the call to actually, they didn't let the Islanders get possession for a few seconds, so you do get the extra skater out there anyways, so I suppose with Grubauer going to the bench, you get the extra skater, you still have a 2-man advantage, but 6-on-4 is not quite as dangerous as 5-on-3, so I don't know, I feel like the Kraken wasted a little bit of the 5-on-3 time just by not immediately letting the Islanders get possession so you could go straight to the 5-on-3. Regardless, while it does take until just about the end of the 5-on-3, the Kraken do eventually find the back of the net to tie the game. It's a nice passing play to get it down towards the net. Eventually, I think it's Eberle up to McCann. McCann, the one-time shot from kind of the high slot area on one side. That is blocked in front, but it bounces out to Dunn. right across from McCann on the other side of the high slot. Dunn fires off the one-time shot, and it goes off the leg of Benier and into the Benier's Maddie and into the back of the net to give the Kraken the power play goal, tying the game at 1. For Maddie, it's another net front goal. I believe now is 11th of the season, and the Kraken, who desperately needed to convert with the two-man advantage, do on this occasion. And then with the remainder of the second power play, the one that McCann drew, the Kraken do actually get back into the offensive end, get a couple chances, but they aren't able to score, really generate anything terribly dangerous to try and get back-to-back power play goals here, but they at least got back in the game, and they're back at 5-on-5, which we do finally get some extended 5-on-5 time now here in the back half of the first period, as we've spent pretty much the entire game in special teams up to this point. But the Kraken don't immediately necessarily grab momentum, but they really do control things at 5-on-5 and slowly tilt the ice more and more towards the Islanders, before eventually the Islanders get another power play. And this one does get some pretty good chances, but Grubauer is able to answer them, and we would get to the first intermission with the game still tied at 1. And then as we get into the second period, for one, the Kraken actually start the second period pretty well. They don't give up any good chances to the opponent right out of the gate, which is already better than what we've seen from really the start of just about any period for the Kraken over the last 5-6 games, really ever since the 8-0-2 stretch ended. The Kraken have had some trouble starting periods on time, and that extends past just the first period where they've been giving up a lot of those early goals. But they start off this second period pretty well, get some early momentum, continue really where they left off at 5-on-5 in the first period before that late power play for the Islanders, their 4th of the period and 4th of the game at that point. But most importantly, the early part of this second period isn't interrupted by officials' whistles, at least not sending guys to the box anyway. Eventually, the Islanders do get a couple of pretty good chances in on Grubauer. He makes a couple of pretty nice saves in tight. What could have easily ended up being a goal, a couple rebound chances that Grubauer is able to kind of get from one side of the crease to the other while making a couple rebound saves. A nice sequence from him there. The Kraken eventually are able to survive that with the fourth line out on the ice, and it's a mix of Freddie Gaudreau and Ryan Winterton. Really, Ryan Winterton finishes off, but eventually they're able to get it out across the blue line and up to Ben Myers as he takes it in transition through the neutral zone. And then as he gets up to the blue line, as it seems like they might go off on a change, they did get kind of hemmed into their end of the ice, but they also see this opportunity for a bit of a rush developing. As Myers approaching the Islanders' blue line, takes it from not quite all the way up by the Kraken benches, but more on that side of center ice than the other, and then just takes it kind of along the blue line out to the far boards from the benches, drawing two Islanders players with him, and then eventually throwing the pass out to the far side where Ryan Winterton is skating into open ice in the offensive end. And on the other side of him, also down the middle of the ice into the play, is Vince Dunn, and just like that, it's a 2-on-1 for the Kraken. Winterton looks shot, then looks over at Dunn, thinks, what the heck, I'll throw him the puck. It's a wide open pass. The one guy back for the Islanders really isn't taking the pass away very effectively at all. So the pass gets across. Dunn, a quick shot into the near side for him, the far side from where the pass came from. Sorokin's not able to get back to that side in time to get his blocker to it. Dunn with the very nice shot into that top corner gets the Kraken the 2-1 lead. But again, while it is Dunn finishing this play, and he did a good job to get up into the play and to finish it, a defenseman coming all the way up to join that rush, is again this fourth line for the Kraken showing up at a big time in the game, and honestly, kind of surviving a bit of a tough shift in the defensive end that they had up till that point, but they're able to survive it, eventually stay tenacious, fight it out across the blue line, and then don't just dump it in deep to go off on a change. They have the awareness to kind of set up like they're just going to dump it in. It does kind of look like Myers is just going to take some time, take the puck along the blue line, and then dump it in to go over and get that change, let the rest of the line and defensive pair get a change. But then as the play's developing, they all together recognize that instead of going off on the change, they could get this rush chance. So a good job there by that line to recognize the opportunity as it developed in front of them and then take advantage of it. What is admittedly less great for the Kraken, though, is just seconds later after they get the lead here, the Islanders get immediately back into the Kraken end of the ice and draw another call. This one is another hooking call, and this one, I think there's much more of a reason to... It's a much more legitimate call. This is one of the ones where I could definitely see this getting called in any game, postseason or otherwise. Regardless, it sends the Kraken once again a man down, but that doesn't last very long. Just seconds into the power play, the Islanders get called for, I think it was a hook or I can't remember what it was. Regardless, it sends us to pretty much 2 minutes of 4-on-4, which the Kraken actually get a pretty good chance at 4-on-4, but they aren't able to convert. And then actually after that point, the Islanders do spend the majority of the 4-on-4 time with the puck, but they aren't able to generate anything dangerous out of it. And then as the 4-on-4 comes to an end, the Kraken clear it down to the other end of the ice, but not fully out of the reach of an Islanders player, or at least not deemed that way by the linesman, who thinks that he could have gotten to it if he had just played it a little bit differently, kind of assuming that the Islanders player played it in such a way that it would make it icing. And if a linesman sees a player kind of give up on a play or do something to allow the puck to get past him for what then would lead to an icing, then they might wave it off. That's what he does here. He waves off the icing. Jaden Schwartz comes in on the forecheck, gets the puck from behind the net, then throws it up to Kaapo Kakko, who's coming into the offensive end from the benches. I think he might have been coming, I think he was the fifth guy coming in. Regardless whether he's right off the bench or just coming across the blue line from in front of the benches, that's where Kaapo comes right into some open ice in the offensive end, gets the pass from Schwartz, picks his spot, takes his shot, and buries it into the far side of the net to give the Kraken the 3-1 lead. For Kakko, it is just his fifth of the season, but he has been producing quite a bit assist-wise for the Kraken, and it does get this line their goal for the game. Again, they did have their chances. Wright had a bit of a breakaway chance coming up in the third that doesn't end up turning into a goal as he remains snake-bitten. He seems to be getting kind of one really good chance a game, and even if he isn't always, not every shift is a particularly good one for Wright, but he has a couple 3 or 4 shifts a game that are pretty good, and he had the one where he ends up on a breakaway later in here, and this particular shot for Kakko that ends up going in to give the Kraken the 3-1 lead. Wright has parked himself on the back door, and if Kakko wanted the pass to Wright, that also could have very easily led to a goal. But considering the outcome here, I think we're more than happy to see the puck end up in the net the way that it did. And yeah, there, I suppose also just to address it, there was the news that apparently the Kraken are open to the possibility of trading Wright if the right package were available. Wright apparently is somewhat frustrated, understandably so, with how his ice time is being handled. So that's all coming to a head, and hopefully it turns into nothing other than rumors. But yeah, that situation is continuing to develop in a way that if it turns into Wright ending up heading out the door will be very frustrating, but hopefully we don't have to deal with that. But anyway, I'm sorry to just drop that out of nowhere if this is the first time you're hearing that news, but it is something that again, it's just rumors from now. Maybe it's one camp or the other just getting it out there to try and spark a fire under the other one. It did seem like they were making a little bit more of a concerted effort to get Wright out on the ice in this game. And again, this is a guy that, from a franchise perspective, I don't know that there's any way that you come out on the right side. You don't come out, I think, on the good side of any trade with Shane Wright at this point in time. So it's not really worth exploring to me, but we'll see if that really ends up picking up any kind of steam going forward. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know how realistic a trade even is. From the Kraken perspective, I think Wright is more valuable to them. They would want to see some kind of package in return that I just don't know that there's that many teams that would be willing to present that kind of package to the Kraken. A similar situation maybe to where Vancouver finds themselves right now with Elias Pettersson, just with a player in Shane Wright who's much younger, and if you were to start developing him correctly, has more potential to grow from where he's at this moment in time. But again, that can be a conversation for a later time. Hopefully it's a conversation that we never have to have again. Hopefully this never comes up. But getting back into the game itself, the Kraken take this 3-1 lead late here after the 4-on-4 comes to an end. But it would not be the last of the special teams in this second period, as again, within seconds of the Kraken scoring a goal for the second straight time here in not that long of a span, within seconds, it's the Islanders back to a power play, and this time, the Kraken will get no evening up call to help them out. They have to kill this one the old-fashioned way, and it does require a couple pretty good saves from Grubauer, but they do get it killed off and get us to the third period with that 3-1 lead. Now, of course, with that being said, the Kraken have also had some issues maintaining leads in the third period over this last stretch of games, so you'd like to see them get off to a good start, and Well, they certainly get an opportunity to get off to a good start as the refs come ready to go in the third period, just like they ended the second and just like they started the first. It's an early power play this time, though, for the Kraken getting the first chance on the power play of the period, and they really don't do anything with it. It's a pretty ineffective power play. And then just as it comes to an end, the Islanders get their seventh and final chance on the power play, which, thankfully for the Kraken, a good job on the kill means that it's equally ineffective. It doesn't really go much of anywhere. And then at 5-on-5, well, the rest of this third period is played until the goalie gets pulled. Actually, an aggressive goalie pull. We'll get to that here in just a second. But the rest of this third period, beyond those first two power plays, one for each team, is played in, well, exactly the way you would expect Kraken Islanders to be played. Very low event. Honestly, it seemed like we went from 5 minutes gone in the period at the time the Kraken, about 5 minutes gone in the period at the time that the Kraken finished the penalty kill on the Islanders power play. And the next thing you know, there's 5 minutes left in the game and hardly anything has happened. Very low event. For the Kraken, they'll happily take that because they got a 2-goal lead. They'll take no events as far as they're concerned. The game can end 3-1. They'll take their 2 points and go home very happy. The Islanders, though, eventually get to a point where nothing has been going on, and they make what I do like this call from them to aggressively pull the goaltender at 4 minutes. And I don't say that I like it from a Kraken standpoint because it works out for the Kraken. They do hit the empty net. I just think that this is, I mean, certainly the analytics would say that you should pull your goaltender earlier than just about any team in the NHL is willing to pull a goaltender, especially down 2, though, when you clearly haven't been generating anything at 5-on-5 over the last 10, 12 minutes or so of this third period. You've generated nothing at 5-on-5 and you're down 2. I like this choice from the Islanders to go for the early goalie pull to try and get something going and get back into the game. It doesn't work out for them. The Kraken do successfully, I mean, they really just don't allow the Islanders to get anything going at 6-on-5. And then eventually it's a shot in that Grubauer stops and has some space and time. So you kind of, it definitely occurred to me, this is probably exactly the moment where Joey Daccord would flip around and try and take the shot. But Grubauer instead just bumps it up along the boards to Montour, who then from 200 feet away, he takes the shot, puts it well wide of the net. But Jared McCann, heads up play, gets in past all the Islanders to negate the icing and also to collect the puck that bounced off the end boards and bump it into the empty net to give the Kraken the 4-1 lead. And that also does mean, with Montour having taken the shot after getting it from Grubauer, that Grubauer picks up the secondary assist, his first point of the season, and the 4th point from a Kraken goaltender, as Daccord already has 3 assists on the season himself. And you know what, for Grubauer, it's also just a fun way, this being his 7th career point, to end another fantastic night and really just keep going this fantastic run of goaltending that he's had throughout the season. But again, for him, another stellar night, a .960 save percentage, 24 saves on 25 shots. I suppose we can just use that here to transition into the full post-game conversation quickly. That, yeah, all in all, a very good game from the Kraken from the goal on out. They played to their, well, I shouldn't say that it really went fully to plan. You never fully plan for that many special teams. You certainly don't plan to go to the box 7 times. But to what Lambert said after the game, he said he had not seen the calls themselves, so he wasn't going to make any comment, especially nothing that's going to get him in trouble with the league. But I wasn't sure how many of them were actually penalties, even if they did get called. And to be perfectly honest, yeah, I don't know that much more than 2 of the penalties against the Kraken were ones that you would usually see even in a regular season game. So in that way, while it could come off as an undisciplined game taking 7 penalties, I don't really think the Kraken played that differently from how you would usually play. There's probably 1 or 2 that they deserved, but certainly not 7 of them. Regardless, the penalty kill stepped up after letting that first one in. Grubauer as well, obviously making a big difference on a couple of those kills. He had some pretty good saves. But the Kraken in general, shot blocking really well. Getting back defensively, whether it was on the penalty kill or even at 5-on-5, really getting back to their game and keeping the front of the net clear, getting to any rebounds, getting in those shooting lanes for those block shots that we talked about, just defensively playing exactly the type of game that they want to play, limiting chances for the opposing team and really not allowing too many dangerous ones. Now, again, I could still see some complaints coming from just the ice time of the 2 younger players that you got your eyes on a little bit more in Catton and Wright. Catton ends up with less than 9 minutes of ice time in this game. Wright has just over 12. And again, for both of those guys, I'd like to see 15 or more minutes of ice time. But in this particular game, I think we'll give it a pass just because of how much time was spent on special teams. Again, 11 penalties being called in this game one way or the other, and some of them did overlap. You had the 4-on-4 for almost 2 minutes, so kind of then 10, and you had the power plays that overlapped a bit for the Kraken. But that's still, I mean, when 10 calls gets you to 20 minutes, that's still just about an entire period of hockey that was played in special teams. And that also breaks up the flow of changing lines. It takes a little bit back into getting your normal lines out there. Depending on how a power play comes to an end or a kill comes to an end, it can take a little bit to get back into the flow of the game of getting the lines the way that you want them. So, I mean, still, I feel like 9 minutes is pretty low for Catton, who I think made a pretty big difference in the 9 minutes he played. Ryan Winterton also had less than 9 minutes, and he's a fourth liner, so I don't think that that's necessarily egregious, but he also made a pretty big difference, even got a point in the less than 9 minutes that he had. So again, we'll see how that progresses in more normal games. For this one, we'll give it a bit of a pass. I do feel like they intended to have Wright's line with Kakko and Schwartz out there a little bit more than they were, but with the special team stuff that happened, it just didn't really end up turning out that way. With all that having been said, enough rambling for me, and let's close this one out with the Kraken 3 stars and get to hopefully more of the same in the next game of, again, a very important game against the Ducks for the Kraken coming up here in a couple days. But before that, we'll get to the Kraken 3 stars for this big win to get that full winning streak started. As always, though, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you do want to help decide 3 stars after every Kraken game, you can head to the link below and support a little bit more than you already are, which I very much appreciate by watching to this point. With the first star, I am going to go with Vince Dunn. I think he had a fantastic game, and I saw some criticisms that people have had. He's had... I think Dunn is definitely one of these players that when things are not going particularly well for the Kraken, I mean, for one, the system that the Kraken are playing right now is one that he likes to try and stretch the ice a little bit more with his breakout passes, and that's not necessarily how they always want to be doing their breakouts. But I think really more so than that is Dunn in particular, and we've seen this ever since the first season, is a player that when the things are not going particularly well for the team, when they've lost a few games in a row, it does seem to affect his play more than others. He starts to take some more chances. He is a very much offensively minded defenseman. He likes to dive down into a play, and we saw that work out in this one. He ends up with a goal because he got down into a play offensively. But these are things that he likes to do, and he definitely, I don't want to say is more willing to, but feels the need to try to dive down into the play and take some more chances, play that high risk, high reward type of game. More and more, the more games the Kraken lose in a row, he tries to be the guy that can make the difference, and that does sometimes end up leading to some costly mistakes that, especially when the team isn't playing well, those costly mistakes can really make a difference back the other way. I don't necessarily know that he had that bad of a game in the last one. I don't know that he was even necessarily that responsible for any of the goals, but regardless, saw the criticism, Dunn stepped up. I don't know that he saw it, but he stepped up in this one, made a huge difference, got put the power play goal off of Beniers, so Beniers gets the goal, but Dunn does take the shot that gets the power play goal to get the Kraken on the board. Then he gives them the lead, actually with the goal from the Winterton setup and Ben Myers. Just in general, I think a very good night from Dunn. Second star, this is where I'll go with Grubauer. I think, again, he kept the Kraken in the game. Yeah, the first one gets past him. It's a pretty nice shot off the post on the power play. I don't know that there's a ton more he could have done about that one, and he made some pretty big saves, good reads, staying out in front of pucks throughout the rest of the game. I think he had a fantastic game again and is a big part of why the Kraken, maybe they still would have won this one anyway if he'd let in, one, maybe two more of those. I still do think generally played as the better team, but especially with 7 penalty kills, you can't discount the goaltender's role in keeping the puck out of the net, and he definitely did on at least a couple of those. Third star, I think you could go a few different ways here. Montour had a pretty good game. Beniers certainly had a pretty good game. I think I am going to go with Jared McCann, though. I think those are the 3 official stars, so maybe not the most out there 3 stars that I'm going with in this one, but McCann up on that first line definitely made a big difference in this one, so we'll go with McCann, the 2-point night, the goal and an assist, even if the goal was an empty netter. Dunn, also a goal and an assist, and yeah, generally a good night, and finally another regulation win for the Kraken. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Who your 3 stars would be if you would change them around. Yeah, how are we feeling now with the Kraken hopefully getting things turned around, and a big one coming up here in a couple days. Actually, a couple big ones. The Kraken have a number of divisional games coming up here before this break, that especially the 2 against the Ducks and the 1 against the Kings, these are games that they really need to come away on the right side of. Until then, though, as always, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.